Yesterday, we talked about rendering expense item component for every single value that there is inside the dummy expense. But if we add more dummy expenses, we have to manually render the expense item, which is not really practical, right? We have to have a dynamic expression or a dynamic arrangements so that as many dummy expenses are there, that many expense items should be rendered. That is our goal today. Okay, so the topic that we are going to discuss is rendering the list. That is the topic. Okay, we do the rendering the list thing using the array.map method. Okay, the syntax of the array.map goes like this. It returns a new array when you apply the map method on the old array, and this map method accepts a function as an argument. This map method is going to be a higher order function now, and this accepts a element as the first argument and the index of that element as the second argument and the entire array as the third argument. Now this array method should return a value, or usually we can call this as a map value. You can do some kind of operation on this element or index, anything. The only important thing is you have to return a value, and this value will be stored into new array. Okay, map method takes a function as an argument. This function will be executed for every single element in this array and returns a new value that will be stored into the new array. Now, if array contains 10 elements, then you will map 10 values, and those 10 map values will be stored into the new array. I hope this is clear. If not, it's a JavaScript class. You can revise it from there. Okay, so let's move on. Now, this is what I want to do. But how do we do it? I want to clear this out. And I want to introduce you one more thing. If you dump an array inside JSX, and this array contains, let's say, some elements like 10, 20, 30, okay, these values will be automatically rendered one by one. Okay, you can also have values of JSX like h1 and say hello, and you can also have a paragraph. Hello. All these values will be automatically rendered one by one and dumped inside the UL tag. Okay, so let's try to run this project. We need to start npm run dev. Let's copy the link and open our favorite browser and paste it here. As you can see, there is 10, 20, 30 values being rendered and hello and paragraph rendered. Okay, now we can utilize this concept and directly render all the values here. Okay, so as you know, array.map method returns a new array. So we can directly dump that new array into the JSX so that values inside this new array will be automatically rendered. Okay, so now let's take the array, which is the dummy expenses dot map, and this map method accepts a function as an argument, right? Now for this map function, the first argument to this is the element of the dummy expense, and let's call it as an expense. On every iteration, you get the expense, and what do you do with this expense? You return a new value, which is an expense item. Here, let me just recite one more time. For every expense in the dummy expense, we will return a new expense item. Okay, but the thing is that expense item should have title, price, and date as properties. So let's pass those values. The title of this expense item should come from the expense dot title. Expense dot title. Now the price should be expense dot price, and the date should be expense dot date. And this whole thing returns us a new array full of expense items, and these expense items will be having the value of the dummy expenses. Clear? One more thing I want to mention here. When you render a list with all these things, the JSX of the list should contain an attribute called as key. Okay, so there should always be a key attribute. It's not mandatory, but it should be there. React identifies every single item of a list using this key. This will help us help React in optimizing the rendering process. Okay, now come back here, key, and we can use the ID expense.id here. So that's it. Now save it, and if you don't mention the key, you will just get a simple warning saying that every list item should have a key attribute. Okay, so let's save it and check back. We already have 3 values, right? And every single thing is a distinct value. Now if you try to remove one value here, okay, let me remove the second. There are only 2 values now. Let's save and check back. We only have 2 values being rendered. It's truly dynamic now, right? So you can copy 10, like make it 6, 9, save, and you should have 9 values now, right? This is what we wanted to do. This is called as rendering the list. Okay, of course, if you don't want your JSX to look so clumsy here, you can take this part out. Okay, let me cut this out till here and come outside or be inside the function itself and write down const expense items equals to this thing. Okay, now just take this expense items and dump it here. Okay, one more problem is this expense item should be an LI. Okay, let me make it as an LI because it's a list item, right? It doesn't change anything in the visual part. I hope this is clear. You learned a topic called as rendering the list, which includes array.map method, and you should also remember that every time you have an array and you dump that into JSX, it will automatically render the values inside the array into the JSX.